On 12 vessels recovered from 3 sites in 2 countries, the same 3 marks appear in the same order, carved so faintly into the base that they went unnoticed for 30 years. On a 13th vessel, raised from a shipwreck 300 meters down, the same 3 marks appear in a different order. And on a disc buried face down at the heart of a Swedish bog, a 4th mark appears that has never been found anywhere else. 3 sites, 1 set of symbols. Until recently, no agreement on how to read any of it. We have followed the Salt Kingdom from its drowning off Jutland, inland to a bog in Smaland, and south to a wreck off Crete. At every stop the marks were there, and at every stop they raised the same question without answering it. This is the story of the team that finally sat down and tried to treat them not as decoration, and not as mystery, but as data. The group that took on the marks was not at first made of archaeologists. It was built around a statistician who studies ancient tally systems, an epigrapher who has spent a career on scripts nobody can read, and a materials scientist who could tell, stroke by stroke, which marks were cut fast and which were cut with care. Their first act was refusing to call the symbols an alphabet. Their second was building a table. The obvious reading tried first and abandoned fastest was language, a name, a prayer, a signature repeated by 12 different hands over 4 centuries, but a name does not reorder itself. A prayer, copied faithfully for generations, does not appear backward on a single vessel from a single ship and nowhere else. Whatever the marks were, they were not behaving like words. It was the statistician who turned the reordering from a problem into a clue. 3 symbols, appearing in different sequences across different objects, is exactly what you would expect not from a name but from a number, a positional count. The same 3 digits rearranged to mean different values. The way the digits 1, 2, and 3 can write 12 different numbers depending on their order. The team stopped asking what the marks said. They started asking what the marks counted. A working theory took shape. Each mark they proposed stood for a value in a 3-symbol counting system, not unlike counting in 3s instead of 10s. Read in sequence, the 3 marks on any vessel would resolve to a single number. It was a clean idea, testable against the one thing the team had in abundance: independently dated vessels, their ages already fixed by laboratories with no stake in what any carving meant. They ran the numbers against every dated vessel in the corpus. If the marks were simply decorative, the results should scatter randomly. They did not. On vessel after vessel, the decoded number came astonishingly close to one specific quantity, the number of years between that vessel's carving date and one fixed point on the calendar, the year of the Jutland flood, around 800 BC. Every vessel, it seemed, had been carved counting down. The wreck vessel was the test that mattered most, because its age was fixed independently by the ship's own timbers 19 years before the flood to the year. Decoded, its reordered marks read, 19, not close, exact. Whatever system the Salt Kingdom's carvers were using, 300 kilometers from home, 3 centuries into their tradition, a young carver on a doomed ship had used it correctly, right up until the number ran out. Naturally, they turned the method on the 4th mark, the one from the oak disc at Holt, buried face down beneath the spiral, found on nothing else in the entire record. It broke the pattern immediately. It was cut differently, deeper, in a single unbroken stroke rather than the layered notches of the other 3. Whatever it was, the team concluded, it was not a 4th digit in the same counting system. It belonged to a different category of mark entirely, and every candidate they could think of for what that category might be started with the word end. For completeness and expecting nothing, they ran the decoding on the oldest reliably dated vessel in the entire record, carved, by every measure, a full century before the flood. A century out, the count should have been large, and it was. What it was not was a countdown to 800 BC. Decoded cleanly, unambiguously, by the same method that had worked on every other vessel including the wreck. The oldest vessel in the Salt Kingdom's record counts down to a date that has never mattered to anyone, in any theory, in this entire investigation. And no one on the team can tell you what happens when it runs out. The team split politely, the way academic teams do. One camp holds that the system was reused across centuries for different purposes. A general-purpose calendar, recalibrated target by target, and the oldest vessel simply counted toward some ordinary, lost occasion no more sinister than a harvest or a festival. The other camp notes, quietly, that every other confirmed use of the system counted down to a catastrophe, and asks what kind of culture builds a countdown clock for anything else. Whichever camp is right, one thing no longer needs debate. A people who left no chronicle, no saga, no name, were nonetheless keeping careful, portable, individually verified track of time relative to a fixed point, reliably enough that a teenager's carving, alone on a sinking trade route, still checks out against a laboratory 3,000 years later. Whatever else the Salt Kingdom was, it was not guessing. Which returns us, uncomfortably, to the flood itself. A civilization capable of counting down to its own ending, decades ahead, across multiple carvers and multiple sites, did not need a prophet. It needed only good records and a reason to believe them. The uncomfortable question was never whether they could know. It is what precisely told them, and whether the same evidence is still sitting in the ground at Jutland, waiting to be read the same patient way the marks were. Which leaves the disk's fourth mark, the deep, single, unbroken stroke that the counting system cannot explain and does not need. If the three marks count down, the fourth may simply mark the count's true end, the last vessel, the last carver, the closing of a workshop we already know closed with the Smaland woman. Or it may be something the team has not yet had the nerve to test the way they tested the others. What the fourth mark measures, and what the coastal settlement's final seasons can tell us about how the Salt Kingdom knew to prepare, that is a story for another time. If this pulled you in, subscribe. New mysteries drop regularly across every series in the Archive project. The next episode's waiting.